He walked into the gleaming halls of Innovate Dynamics, looking like a ghost from a forgotten time, a man wholly out of place. They had no idea he was the very architect of their future, the one mind capable of solving the equation that held their billion-dollar project hostage. Dressed in a worn cardigan and carrying a simple toolbox, he was mistaken for a humble repairman. The director, a man draped in arrogance and a tailored suit, sneered at him, telling him to fix a flickering light, completely oblivious to the fact that the quiet man before him was the legendary mathematician, Dr. Alistair Finch. The director would point to the impossible equation on the central whiteboard, a problem that had stumped his entire team of geniuses for months, and mockingly tell the repairman to solve it. What happened next left everyone in the room speechless and would change the very foundation of their company forever. He never saw it coming, and the lesson he was about to learn would be one of profound humiliation and unexpected grace. A stark reminder that true genius often hides in the plainest of forms, and that judging a book by its cover can be the most expensive mistake one can ever make. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. The air inside the global headquarters of Innovate Dynamics was a finely tuned instrument, humming with the low thrum of immense computational power and the palpable tension of intellectual ambition. It was a cathedral of modern engineering, a place where chrome, glass, and polished concrete conspired to create an atmosphere of sterile brilliance. Sunlight, meticulously filtered through smart glass, cast long geometric shadows across floors, so clean they mirrored the determined faces of the people who walked them. Everyone here was the best, the brightest, hand-picked from the most prestigious institutions on the planet, all unified by a single, audacious goal: the completion of the Helios Project. This project was not merely a product, it was a paradigm shift. A new form of propulsion technology that promised to redefine space travel and secure Innovate Dynamics' place in the annals of human history. At the heart of this grand endeavor was the War Room, a secure, circular chamber where the project's brain trust converged. The room was dominated by a 360-degree whiteboard, a canvas of white porcelain currently covered in a sprawling, terrifyingly complex tapestry of mathematical notations. This was the wall, the intellectual barrier that had brought the multi-billion-dollar project to a grinding, silent halt. For 6 agonizing months, the brightest minds in the company had thrown themselves at this equation, a quantum decoherence problem that was the final key to stabilizing the Helios drive. And for 6 agonizing months, the equation had stared back, impassive and undefeated. Into this high-stakes intellectual arena, Dr. Alistair Finch entered with the quiet, unassuming grace of a man who had long ago made peace with the world's noise. He wore a gray cardigan, the elbows softened and worn to a gentle sheen, over a simple, faded blue t-shirt. His jeans were comfortable, not fashionable, and his work boots, though clean, bore the scuffs and creases of many thoughtful, meandering walks. In his hand, he carried a small, old-fashioned leather toolbox, not because he was a repairman, but because it contained a few specialized diagnostic tools he had built himself decades ago for tinkering with antiquated server hardware. He was here as a favor to Robert Sterling, the company's CEO and an old university friend. One of their archaic archival servers, a relic from the company's early days, had finally given up the ghost, and Alistair, who had designed its core architecture in his youth, he was the only person on Earth who could coax it back to life without losing the invaluable legacy data stored within. He had been told to simply find the server room on the 3rd floor and let himself in. The War Room was merely a space he had to pass through, an antechamber to his actual, much humbler, task. Marcus Thorne, the director of advanced propulsion, stood at the center of the War Room like a conductor without an orchestra. He was a man sculpted by ambition and tailored by Savile Row. His suit was a razor-sharp sheath of dark charcoal wool, his tie a slash of crimson silk knotted with military precision. He cultivated an aura of impatient genius, pacing the room with a rhythmic, predatory grace. His eyes, cold and analytical, scanned the faces of his team, a collection of brilliant engineers and physicists who now looked defeated, their shoulders slumped, their gazes fixed on the monstrous equation that held their careers in a stranglehold. Marcus thrived on pressure, but this prolonged failure was beginning to curdle his confidence into a corrosive frustration. He saw the project slipping, the timeline bleeding red, and his own star, once a meteoric ascent, beginning to flicker. When his gaze fell upon Alistair Finch, standing hesitantly by the doorway, it was not with curiosity but with irritation. He saw not a man, but a discrepancy, an anomaly in his pristine, high-performance environment. The worn cardigan, the simple jeans, the toolbox, they were symbols of a world he had long since left behind. A world of manual labor and simple problems. The sight of Alistair was a dissonant note in the symphony of his ambition, and he moved to correct it with the swift, dismissive authority that had become his trademark. He straightened his tie, a small, symbolic gesture of reasserting control, and strode towards the quiet man, his polished Italian leather shoes clicking an aggressive rhythm on the floor. The entire room, already taut with tension, seemed to hold its breath. They knew their director's temper, his intolerance for anything less than perfection, and they sensed a storm was about to break. Alistair, for his part, simply observed, his calm, placid expression betraying nothing of the vast, complex universe of thought that existed behind his eyes. He was just a man looking for a server room, momentarily paused by the fascinating, intricate beauty of the problem that covered the walls around him. He took a slow, steadying breath. A man of substance in a room obsessed with style, completely unaware that he was about to become the epicenter of its dramatic and long overdue reckoning. The clash of these two worlds was not just imminent, it was inevitable, a collision of arrogance and humility that would send shockwaves through the entire corporation and redefine what it meant to be a true powerhouse. The setup was complete, the stage perfectly arranged for the drama that was about to unfold. On one side stood Marcus Thorne, a monument to superficial success, his entire being a carefully constructed facade of authority and intellectual superiority. His world was one of hierarchies, of judging individuals by their attire, their job titles, and their perceived place in the corporate food chain. He saw Alistair and his mind, conditioned by years of such evaluations, performed a swift and brutal calculation. Old clothes plus toolbox equals irrelevance. This man was a maintenance worker, a janitor, a low-level technician who had wandered into a space far beyond his clearance level. The thought that this individual could possess any value beyond a menial task was not just unlikely. It was, in Marcus's universe, an impossibility. On the other side stood Dr. Alistair Finch, a man for whom the external world was little more than a gentle hum, a distant distraction from the vibrant, infinite landscape of his own mind. His cardigan was not a statement of poverty but a cocoon of comfort, a familiar garment that allowed him to think without the trivial distraction of fashion. The toolbox was not a symbol of his station but a collection of solutions for a specific, tangible problem. He was a being of pure intellect, a mind that had unraveled some of the universe's most profound secrets. Yet, he carried himself with a quiet dignity that asked for nothing and expected even less. His current objective was simple: find server rack 7. B. The sprawling equation on the wall was an unexpected and delightful diversion, a beautiful problem that his mind began to engage with instinctively, the way a musician might subconsciously analyze a complex piece of music. He was not there to impress anyone. He was simply being himself. The contrast between the two men was a chasm, a stark juxtaposition of the seen and the unseen, the performed and the authentic. The supporting characters in this drama were the assembled engineers, the supposed geniuses of Innovate Dynamics. They were caught in the middle, trapped between their respect for the intellectual challenge on the board and their fear of Marcus's volatile authority. Among them was Chloe, a junior physicist, a young woman whose brilliance was still paired with a refreshing lack of cynicism. She had noticed Alistair when he first entered, giving him a brief, polite smile, assuming he was there to fix the notoriously unreliable air conditioning unit. She saw his simple clothes but also the quiet intelligence in his eyes, the way he seemed to be truly seeing the equation, not just looking at it. She felt a pang of apprehension as Marcus began his purposeful stride towards the unassuming visitor. A sense of an injustice about to be committed. She, unlike her boss, had not yet learned to equate a person's worth with their wardrobe. The air crackled with dramatic irony. The audience, privy to the title and the premise, knew exactly who Alistair was. They watched the scene unfold with a building sense of anticipation, waiting for the inevitable moment of revelation. Every condescending word from Marcus would be another shovel of dirt he was digging for his own professional grave. Every calm, patient response from Alistair would be another step towards the climactic vindication. The power imbalance was, on the surface, absolute. Marcus held all the cards. The title, the suit, the authority, the room full of intimidated employees. But the true power, the real, world-changing genius, resided in the quiet man who was just trying to get his bearings and was about to be grievously underestimated. The confrontation was not just about two men. It was a symbolic clash between two value systems, one that worshipped the superficial trappings of success, and one that honored the deep, unseen power of genuine intellect and humility. The first act of humiliation was delivered not with a shout, but with a sneer. Marcus stopped a few feet from Alistair, deliberately invading his personal space. A classic power move designed to intimidate. He did not address Alistair directly at first. Instead, he spoke to the room at large, his voice dripping with condescension, as if commenting on a piece of trash that had inexplicably appeared on his pristine floor. "Can someone tell me why the maintenance staff is wandering through a classified project area?" he asked, his eyes locked on Alistair. The question hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The engineers shifted uncomfortably, their gazes darting between their imperious boss and the calm, older man. No one spoke. The silence amplified the insult. Alistair, who had been tracing a particularly elegant line of tensor calculus on the board with his eyes, brought his focus back to the man in front of him. He showed no sign of offense. His expression one of mild, academic curiosity. He seemed to be studying Marcus as if he were a peculiar, though not particularly interesting, new type of organism. "I was looking for the archival server room," Alistair said, his voice soft but clear, carrying a steady, even tone that offered no purchase for Marcus's aggression. The simplicity of the answer only fueled Marcus's disdain. It confirmed his initial assessment. This was a menial worker, a nobody. "The server room?" Marcus echoed, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. He let out a short, derisive laugh. "I think you've taken a wrong turn. This is the Helios war room. This is where important work is done. We are trying to solve problems that are a little above your pay grade." He gestured expansively at the whiteboard covered in equations. "This isn't a faulty light fixture or a leaky pipe. This is the future of interstellar travel. Do you understand?" The public nature of the dressing down was intentional. A performance for his team. It was a way of reasserting his dominance, of reminding them that he was in charge, the gatekeeper of this temple of innovation. He wanted to make an example of this intruder. Chloe, the junior physicist, felt a knot of shame tighten in her stomach. The casual cruelty was appalling. She made eye contact with Alistair for a fleeting moment, trying to convey an apology with her expression. A silent dissent against her boss's behavior. Alistair gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod in her direction. A silent acknowledgement that he understood. He then turned his attention back to Marcus. "I understand perfectly," Alistair replied, his calmness utterly unruffled. "I was assured I would have access. My name is Alistair Finch. Robert Sterling is expecting me." The name meant nothing to Marcus. In his mind, it was just another name on a work order. The mention of the CEO was a minor annoyance. A bit of name-dropping from a lowly technician trying to avoid trouble. "Mr. Sterling is a very busy man," Marcus said dismissively, waving his hand as if to swat away the name. "I'm sure he has more important things to worry about than the server maintenance schedule. Now, if you'll just find your way out, we can get back to the actual work that matters." He turned his back on Alistair. a gesture of final dismissal, and began to walk back towards the center of the room, believing the matter to be concluded. But Alistair did not move. He simply stood there, a picture of quiet persistence, his gaze once again drawn to the magnificent, unsolved puzzle that adorned the walls. The first wave of humiliation had washed over him and left him completely untouched. The confrontation escalated, moving from dismissive arrogance to direct public mockery. Seeing that Alistair had not scurried away as commanded, Marcus Thorne felt a surge of irritation. His authority had been implicitly challenged, and he could not let that stand. He turned back, his face a mask of theatrical disbelief. "Are you still here?" he asked, his voice louder this time, demanding the attention of every person in the room. "Did you not understand what I said? This is a restricted area. For a certain class of people, you do not belong here." The phrase hung in the air, a deliberate and cutting piece of verbal cruelty. It was designed to segregate, to classify, to put Alistair firmly in his place as an outsider, an inferior. The engineers stared at their monitors, pretending to be absorbed in their work, the collective discomfort in the room becoming almost a physical presence. They were all complicit in their silence, bound by the hierarchical chains of the corporate world. Alistair's continued placidity seemed to infuriate Marcus even more. It was like striking a pillow. The lack of a satisfying wounded reaction was maddening. He decided to turn his mockery into a full-blown spectacle. A wicked, inspired idea bloomed in his mind, a way to definitively prove the intellectual chasm that separated them, and to entertain himself in the process. He strode over to the vast whiteboard, the focal point of the room's collective failure. He picked up a black marker, tapping it theatrically against the porcelain surface, drawing all eyes to the heart of the unsolvable equation. "You know what?" Marcus began, a malicious grin spreading across his face. "Since you're so interested in our work, why don't you make yourself useful? You look like a man who's good with his hands. Maybe you're good with numbers too." He gestured with the marker towards the most complex section of the proof, a knot of differential geometry and quantum field theory that had consumed thousands of hours of computational analysis and had still yielded no solution. The room was dead silent. Even the quiet hum of the servers in the background seemed to have ceased. Chloe watched in horror, her hands clenched into fists beneath her desk. This was no longer just arrogance. It was a form of intellectual sadism. "Here," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false magnanimity as he uncapped the marker. "This is the core of our problem. The quantum decoherence cascade in the Helios manifold." He pointed to a specific string of symbols. "All we need to do is stabilize it. It's really quite simple. If you have the capacity." He let the word hang, heavy with insinuation. He then took a step back, a showman presenting his grand challenge. "Go on," he urged, his grin widening as a few of his more sycophantic senior engineers chuckled nervously. "Give it a try! Solve the equation! Show us all how it's done." He extended the marker towards Alistair, a mock offering. The humiliation was now complete. Alistair was not just being dismissed. He was being turned into the court jester, a prop in Marcus's cruel theater of power. He was being publicly challenged to perform a task that a roomful of PhDs had deemed impossible, the punchline to a joke that everyone but him was supposed to be in on. The marker, a simple plastic tool, was now a gauntlet thrown down, a symbol of the profound and arrogant underestimation that was about to spectacularly backfire. The moment stretched into a tense, elastic silence. Every eye in the war room was fixed on the quiet man in the worn cardigan. They expected him to stammer an excuse, to shrink under the weight of the humiliation, to turn and flee. They expected a reaction of shame or anger, the predictable response of a man pushed far beyond his station. But Dr. Alistair Finch did none of those things. He simply looked at the proffered marker, then at Marcus's smug, expectant face, and finally, his gaze settled on the vast, beautiful, and flawed equation on the whiteboard. For the first time, a subtle shift occurred in his demeanor. It was not anger or embarrassment. It was the quiet, focused intensity of a master craftsman, seeing a piece of work that was almost perfect. But for one critical, foundational error. He took a deep, steadying breath. A small, symbolic action of a man centering himself before an important task. The air in the room seemed to thin, the ambient hum of the building fading into a distant murmur. Alistair stepped forward, his old work boots making no sound on the polished floor. He reached out and took the black marker from Marcus's hand. His fingers, long and nimble, closed around the plastic cylinder with a quiet familiarity. Marcus's sneering grin faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flicker of confusion. This was not part of his script. The repairman was supposed to refuse, to be cowed. By accepting the marker, he was calling the bluff, and for the first time, a sliver of uncertainty pierced Marcus's armor of arrogance. Alistair walked towards the whiteboard, his steps measured and calm. The engineers watched, mesmerized, a strange cocktail of pity and morbid curiosity bubbling within them. Chloe leaned forward in her chair, her heart pounding. She didn't know who this man was, but his dignity in the face of such scorn was captivating. He was not acting like a victim. He was acting like a professional about to begin his work. Reaching the board, Alistair did not immediately start writing. Instead, he stood before it for a full minute, his head tilted slightly, his eyes scanning the entire breathtaking sweep of the problem. He was not just looking at the symbols, he was communing with them, reading the story they told, the story of a brilliant team that had made a single, elegant, and catastrophic mistake in their initial assumptions. He saw their journey, their struggle, and the precise point where they had veered off the path of logic and into a labyrinth of their own making. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he reached up with his free hand and wiped away a single line of code near the very beginning of the primary derivation. It was the foundational axiom upon which all their subsequent work had been built. A collective gasp, quiet but audible, rippled through the room. It was an act of such intellectual audacity that it bordered on sacrilege. That one line represented months of work, a cornerstone of their entire theoretical framework. Marcus stared, his mouth slightly agape, the smirk now completely gone, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. The quiet repairman wasn't just playing along, he was rewriting their Bible. The scratching of the marker on the porcelain whiteboard was the only sound in the cavern of silence. It was a rhythmic, confident sound. The sound of pure thought flowing unimpeded into tangible form. Alistair began to write. And what appeared on the board was not a correction, but a complete and profound reimagining of the problem. He did not engage with their flawed framework. He discarded it entirely, building a new one from first principles with a speed and elegance that was nothing short of breathtaking. His hand moved with a fluid, unwavering certainty. Each symbol, each integral, each vector placed with the precision of a grandmaster, placing pieces on a chessboard. The engineers, who had initially been watching with a sense of detached pity, now found themselves leaning forward, their minds struggling to keep pace with the torrent of genius unfolding before them. The mathematics was dense, esoteric, and yet there was a shocking simplicity to its core logic, a fundamental truth that they had all somehow overlooked. He was not just solving their equation. He was revealing a deeper, more elegant reality that underpinned the entire physical process they were trying to model. Chloe, the young physicist, was the first to truly grasp the magnitude of what was happening. Her own doctoral thesis had touched upon the fringes of the theoretical model Alistair was now casually constructing. She recognized the notation, a highly advanced form of geometric algebra that was favored by only a handful of the world's most reclusive and brilliant theoretical physicists. It was a mathematical language of almost poetic beauty, capable of describing complex quantum interactions with an efficiency that standard models could not hope to match. Her eyes widened, not just with understanding, but with awe. The scrawled lines on the board were not just math, they were a revelation. He was weaving together disparate fields, quantum chromodynamics, information theory, differential topology into a single unified tapestry of logic. A problem that had been a brick wall for their supercomputers was dissolving into a series of elegant, almost self-evident steps under the relentless pressure of his intellect. Murmurs began to spread through the room. Hushed whispers of disbelief. "Look at that. He's bypassing the Schrödinger dependency entirely. Is that a Finch transform? I thought that was purely theoretical. My God. He's not solving for stability. He's proving that instability was never a risk in the first place." The comments were fragmented, spoken by minds that were simultaneously trying to process the math and the impossible reality of the man who was writing it. Marcus Thorne stood frozen, the color draining from his face. The sneer of derision had been replaced by a pallor of pure, unadulterated shock. His entire worldview was crumbling in real time. The carefully constructed hierarchy of his mind, where expensive suits and important titles sat at the apex and worn cardigans languished at the bottom, was being systematically dismantled by each new line of calculus that appeared on the board. The man he had dismissed as a simpleton, a piece of irrelevant background scenery, was demonstrating a level of genius that Marcus could not even begin to comprehend. The marker in Alistair's hand was no longer a prop in a cruel joke. It was a scepter. And he was a king, effortlessly commanding a kingdom of abstract thought that was far beyond Marcus's borders. Alistair wrote for what felt like an eternity, yet was perhaps only 10 minutes. He filled the empty space on the whiteboard, his new framework branching out, answering not only the central problem but also a dozen peripheral questions that the team had not even thought to ask yet. He demonstrated how the Helios drive could be made 20% more efficient, how its energy signature could be reduced to near zero, and how its operational lifespan could be tripled. He was not just fixing a leaky pipe. He was redesigning the entire plumbing system of the universe as it pertained to their project. Finally, he wrote the last line of the proof, a statement of such finality and elegance that it seemed to hum with its own inherent truth. He underlined it with a single, decisive stroke. He then placed the cap back on the marker with a quiet click, the sound echoing in the profound silence like a gavel falling. He turned away from the board, his work complete, his expression as calm and unreadable as it had been when he first walked in. He had sought no audience, desired no applause. He had simply seen a problem and had, in his own quiet way, corrected it. It was in that exact moment of stunned, reverent silence that the door to the war room slid open. Robert Sterling, the CEO of Innovate Dynamics, walked in, a broad, friendly smile on his face. He was a man whose warm demeanor belied a razor-sharp intellect, the very visionary who had bet the company's future on the Helios Project. He was dressed in a simple but well-made blazer, his appearance a comfortable middle ground between Marcus's aggressive formality and Alistair's deliberate simplicity. His eyes scanned the room, immediately clocking the strange, tableau-like scene. His entire senior propulsion team standing like statues, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. His star director, Marcus Thorne, looking as though he had seen a ghost. And in the center of it all, his old friend. "Alistair! There you are!" Sterling boomed, his voice full of genuine warmth. He strode forward, clapping a hand on Alistair's shoulder. "I was just about to come looking for you. I trust you found your way all right." He then noticed the marker in Alistair's hand and glanced at the whiteboard, his eyes widening slightly as he took in the sea of new equations. He let out a low whistle. "Good Lord, Alistair! I asked you to come and fix a 30-year-old server, and it looks like you fixed the entire Helios project instead. Did Marcus get you the coffee I asked for? He was supposed to be looking after you." The question, so simple, so casual, was the final, devastating blow. It shattered the last vestiges of Marcus's reality. The name. He had heard the name Alistair Finch but had dismissed it. Now, hearing it from the CEO, connected to this man, the pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Dr. Alistair Finch, the reclusive titan of theoretical mathematics. The author of Finch's Principles of Quantum Manifolds, the very textbook that sat, unread, on Marcus's own bookshelf. The living legend whose foundational work in the 1990s was the reason the Helios Project was even theoretically possible. He wasn't a repairman who had been asked to solve an equation. He was the architect of the entire cathedral, who had been mocked by a janitor for not knowing how to sweep the floors. The full weight of the reveal descended upon the room, crushing the atmosphere of stunned silence into one of pure, unadulterated shock. The name Dr. Alistair Finch echoed in the minds of every engineer present. They were all scholars of their field. They knew the name the way a student of art knows the name Picasso. It was a name associated with foundational theories, with leaps of intuition so profound they bordered on the mystical. And that name belonged to the quiet, unassuming man in the worn cardigan whom they had all just watched their boss systematically humiliate. They looked from the man to the board and back again. The impossible genius of the solution now made a terrifying kind of sense. This wasn't a fluke or a lucky guess. It was a master returning to his craft. Robert Sterling, sensing the thick, charged atmosphere, let his gaze drift from Alistair to Marcus. He saw his director's ashen face, the slight tremor in his hand, the way his eyes were wide with a dawning horror. He then looked at the faces of the other engineers, the mixture of awe directed at Alistair and the palpable fear directed at Marcus. Finally, his eyes fell upon the black marker still held loosely in Alistair's hand. Sterling was a shrewd leader, a man who understood the nuances of human interaction as well as he understood a balance sheet. He didn't need a detailed report. The scene told him everything he needed to know. The condescension, the arrogance, the public humiliation, it was all written in the body language of the room. A deep, profound disappointment settled on his features, replacing his earlier warmth. He had handpicked Marcus Thorne, believing his ambition was a sign of strength. Now, he saw it for what it was. A brittle shell covering a deep-seated insecurity. "Marcus," Sterling said, his voice dropping the friendly tone, becoming quiet, level, and intensely serious. The use of his first name, spoken with such gravity, was more chilling than any shout. "Perhaps you could explain to me what has been happening here." Marcus Thorne opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could he possibly say? How could he articulate the sheer, catastrophic scale of his misjudgment? His mind, usually so quick and decisive, was a frantic mess of panicked thoughts. He had not just insulted a visitor, he had ridiculed the very giant on whose shoulders his entire project, his entire career, was built. He had mocked a god in his own temple. His professional veneer, the carefully cultivated image of the unflappable, brilliant leader, cracked and then shattered into a million pieces. All that was left was a raw, exposed fear. The terror of a man who has just realized he has committed an unpardonable sin. He looked at Alistair, truly looked at him for the first time, not as a collection of worn clothes but as the man he was. And the intellectual gulf between them felt as vast and as cold as the space their Helios drive was meant to conquer. The silence stretched. And in that silence, Marcus's career at Innovate Dynamics effectively ended. He had been weighed, he had been measured, and in the presence of true, humble genius, he had been found profoundly wanting. The comeuppance was delivered not with the fire of rage, but with the cold, precise incision of a surgeon. Robert Sterling looked at Marcus Thorne, and in his eyes, Marcus saw the full measure of his failure. It was not just about the disrespect shown to a guest. It was about a fundamental flaw in character that Sterling could not, and would not, tolerate in his leadership. At Innovate Dynamics, we believe our greatest asset is our intellectual capital, Sterling began, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight of authority that filled the room. He was no longer speaking just to Marcus, but to everyone present, turning a moment of personal failure into a crucial teaching moment for the entire company. We believe that genius can come from anywhere, and that humility is the essential lubricant for collaboration. We believe that a person's worth is measured by the content of their ideas, not the cut of their suit. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, striking at the very core of Marcus's flawed value system. What happened here today? Sterling continued, his gaze unwavering from Marcus, is a symptom of a sickness of arrogance, a belief that you can judge a person's value based on their appearance. That is not who we are. That is not what the Helios Project is about. End of quote. Repoint 51, with Minio Lovenberg 16 right in fight is O. We are trying to elevate humanity, and that starts with how we treat each other. Right here in this room. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. You did not just fail to recognize Dr. Finch. You failed to recognize the core principles of this company. You created an environment of fear and mockery instead of one of curiosity and respect. And for that, there must be consequences. Marcus visibly flinched. The consequences were not merely about his job. They were about the public dismantling of his identity. Sterling then turned to the rest of the team. Let this be a lesson to all of you. The work we do is too important to be derailed by ego. The next time you are tempted to dismiss someone because they don't look the part, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember the day the man you thought was a repairman rewrote the future of this company because he was the only one in the room humble enough to see the truth. Finally, he turned back to a pale, trembling Marcus. Your leadership of this project is over, effective immediately. We will be reassigning you to our internal audit division in the sub-basement, where you will spend the next year reviewing legacy code. Perhaps there, working with the foundations of our company, you will learn something about the value of what came before you. You will attend mandatory leadership and sensitivity training. This is not just a punishment, Marcus. It is an opportunity. An opportunity to learn, to grow, and to become the kind of leader this company actually needs. The demotion was brutal in its poetic justice. He was being sent from the glittering war room to the forgotten sub-basement, from the future of propulsion to the ghosts of old code. He was being forced to confront the very legacy systems he so readily dismissed, the same kind of system that Dr. Finch had come to service. The comeuppance was complete, a perfectly symmetrical reflection of his own prejudice, delivered in front of the very people he had tried to impress with his misguided display of power. The immediate aftermath in the war room was a study in contrasts. While Marcus Thorne stood frozen in the ruins of his career, a profound sense of relief and quiet celebration began to ripple through the rest of the team. It was as if a great oppressive weight had been lifted from their shoulders. The departure of Marcus's toxic, ego-driven leadership style opened up a space for genuine collaboration to finally begin. Engineers who had been too intimidated to voice their more unconventional ideas now began to speak up, clustering around the whiteboard, their faces alight with a newfound excitement. They spoke in hushed, reverent tones, dissecting the genius of Dr. Finch's solution, each line of his work sparking new insights and possibilities. The equation was no longer a symbol of their failure but a gateway to a new, more promising future. Amidst this intellectual fervor, Chloe, the junior physicist, approached Dr. Finch. She was hesitant, her awe making her feel like a student approaching a revered master. Dr. Finch, she began, her voice barely a whisper. I just wanted to say thank you. What you did, it was the most brilliant thing I have ever seen. Alistair, who had been quietly observing the renewed energy in the room, turned to her with a warm, gentle smile. The intimidating aura of genius was gone, replaced by the simple kindness of a good teacher. The math was always there, he said softly. You all were very close. You just needed to question your first assumption. It's often the things we take for granted that hold us back the most. He saw the genuine passion for knowledge in her eyes, the same passion that had driven him his entire life. He spent the next hour with her and a few other junior engineers, patiently walking them through the nuances of his proof, answering their questions, and encouraging their ideas. In that hour, he taught them more than they had learned in the last 6 months, under Marcus's tyrannical reign. He was not just a genius, he was a generous one. A man who believed that knowledge was something to be shared, not hoarded as a source of power. Robert Sterling watched this interaction from a distance, a deep sense of satisfaction on his face. This was the culture he wanted to build. He had dealt with the sickness, now he was watching the healing begin. He quietly arranged for Alistair's actual task, the archival server, to be handled by a specialized team. His friend's work here was far more valuable. Before Alistair left for the day, Sterling walked him to the door. "Ali," he said, using the old nickname from their university days, "I cannot thank you enough. Not just for this," he gestured to the board, "but for reminding us of who we are supposed to be." Alistair simply nodded, adjusting the worn cardigan on his shoulders. "Brilliance without humility is a dangerous thing, Robert," he said. "Remember that." With those parting words, he walked out of the war room, leaving behind a solved equation, a shattered career, and the seeds of a profound cultural transformation. The vindication was not just his. It was a vindication of substance over style, of humility over arrogance, of quiet genius over loud ambition. A year passed, a period of profound and systemic change for Innovate Dynamics. The resolution of the Helios Project's core equation acted as a catalyst, not just for the project itself, but for the entire company's ethos. The story of the repairman and the director became an internal legend, a modern corporate parable that was quietly shared with every new hire. It was a potent reminder that the company's most valuable assets were its people and its ideas, regardless of the package they came in. The Helios Project, under new, more collaborative leadership with the recently promoted Chloe playing a key role on the theory team, surged forward at an incredible pace. Dr. Finch's solution proved to be even more revolutionary than initially understood, unlocking efficiencies and capabilities they hadn't dared to dream of. The project was not only back on schedule, it was years ahead, poised to launch a prototype that would exceed every benchmark. The war room, once a place of tension and fear, became a vibrant hub of innovation, its whiteboards filled with the excited scrawls of open, uninhibited debate. The culture of the company began to shift, slowly but surely. Robert Sterling, deeply impacted by the incident, instituted a series of company-wide initiatives. The Finch Program was established, a mentorship initiative that paired senior scientists with the youngest and newest hires, fostering a culture of knowledge, sharing, and mutual respect. A new humility and leadership training module became mandatory for all management-level employees. They even changed their hiring practices, looking beyond traditional metrics and prestigious universities to find raw, unconventional talent in unexpected places. The company, in essence, was learning to look for the genius hidden in plain sight. And what of Marcus Thorne? He spent his year in the digital salt mines of the sub-basement, a place far removed from the glory and prestige he had once craved. The work was tedious, isolating, and deeply humbling. He spent his days sifting through lines of legacy code, the forgotten foundations upon which the company's modern marvels were built. In the quiet solitude of that basement, stripped of his title, his suit, and his audience, Marcus was forced to confront himself. He read Dr. Finch's textbook, this time not as a prop for his bookshelf, but with the desperate curiosity of a man trying to understand the nature of the mind that had so completely upended his world. He attended his mandatory training sessions, and to everyone's surprise, he did not just go through the motions. He listened. He learned. He began to understand the corrosive nature of his own ego. The experience did not break him, it remade him. It was a painful, ego-shattering process. But from it, a different man began to emerge. One who was quieter, more thoughtful, and for the first time in his life, genuinely humble. He had been given not just a punishment, but a chance at redemption. And he was slowly, painstakingly, beginning to take it. The final act of the story's resolution arrived in the form of a simple, handwritten letter. 1 year to the day after the fateful encounter in the war room, a letter arrived at Dr. Alistair Finch's quiet, book-filled home. The envelope was plain, the return address simply that of Innovate Dynamics. Alistair opened it to find a single sheet of paper, filled with neat, precise handwriting. It was from Marcus Thorne. The letter was not an excuse or a justification. It was a profound and deeply felt apology. Marcus wrote of his shame and regret, not just for the humiliation he had caused, but for the blindness of his own prejudice. He confessed that his year in the sub-basement had been the most important and transformative education of his life. He thanked Alistair, not for solving the equation, but for solving him, for holding up a mirror that forced him to see the arrogant, fearful man he had become. He wrote that he finally understood that true strength did not come from a title or a tailored suit, but from the quiet confidence of genuine knowledge and the grace of humility. He ended the letter by stating that he had submitted his resignation to Innovate Dynamics, as he felt he had not earned the right to be a part of the future he had so nearly sabotaged. He was planning to take a teaching position at a small community college, hoping to help nurture the next generation of minds and, in his words, to spend the rest of my career looking for the genius in others, rather than trying to prove my own. Alistair read the letter, and a gentle smile touched his lips. The man's redemption was complete. He had not only learned his lesson, he had embraced it, choosing a path of service over one of ambition. The systemic change within the company was a victory, but the genuine transformation of a single individual was, to Alistair, a far more profound one. The story had come full circle. The arrogant gatekeeper had become a humble teacher. The hidden genius had returned to his quiet life, his work having silently reshaped the world once more. A few months later, the first successful test flight of the Helios prototype took place, shattering every record for speed and efficiency. The world celebrated a new dawn of space exploration, hailing Robert Stirling and Innovate Dynamics as visionary pioneers. In the press conferences, Stirling always made a point to mention that the breakthrough was only possible due to the foundational principles of humility and collaboration. And he always paid tribute to the quiet, unseen giants of science upon whose shoulders they stood. The story of that day in the war room was never made public, but its impact was felt in every success the company achieved thereafter. It became the soul of the machine, a constant, guiding principle that ensured that as the company reached for the stars, its feet remained firmly planted on the ground, rooted in the simple, powerful truth that a brilliant mind is a treasure, and a humble heart is the key that unlocks its greatest potential. The tale of Dr. Alistair Finch and Marcus Thorne is more than just a story of mistaken identity. It is a powerful parable for our times, a moral lesson etched in the dramatic clash between two opposing worldviews. It serves as a stark reminder of a truth we often forget in a world obsessed with appearances and status: that the true measure of a person is not found in the clothes they wear, the title they hold, or the authority they wield. True worth lies in the unseen, in the quiet depths of character, the power of intellect, and the profound grace of humility. How many times have we, like Marcus, made a snap judgment about someone based on a superficial first impression? How often have we dismissed an idea because the person presenting it didn't fit our preconceived notion of what an expert should look like? We build walls of prejudice based on the flimsiest of materials: a worn-out cardigan, an old car, a quiet demeanor, and in doing so, we risk walling ourselves off from the very genius and wisdom that could enrich our lives and solve our most complex problems. This narrative forces us to look inward and question our own biases. It champions the underdog, not just for the cathartic satisfaction of seeing the humble vindicated, but to teach us that the most extraordinary individuals are often disguised in the most ordinary of packages. Dr. Finch's power was not diminished by his simple attire. In fact, his lack of concern for external validation was a source of his immense strength. It allowed his mind to work, free from the crippling distractions of ego. He sought neither fame nor fortune. He sought only to understand, to solve, and to contribute. His story is a testament to the idea that substance will always, in the end, triumph over style. It's a call to action for each of us to cultivate a spirit of curiosity and respect towards everyone we meet. We must learn to look beyond the surface and recognize the potential for brilliance in every individual. The kind witness, Chloe, represents the best in us, the ability to see a person and not a stereotype. The reformed Marcus represents the hope that even the most prejudiced among us can change, that humility can be learned, often through the painful but necessary process of being humbled. So, the next time you find yourself about to judge a book by its cover, pause. And remember this story. Remember the quiet man in the cardigan who held the universe in his mind. Ask yourself, what genius might I be overlooking? What incredible potential am I about to dismiss? If you have ever experienced a moment where you were judged unfairly or have witnessed someone else being underestimated, share your story in the comments below. Let us build a community that celebrates substance, champions humility, and is always willing to look for the extraordinary in the ordinary. Your true worth is not defined by external appearances, but by your character and how you treat others. By fostering an environment of respect and open-mindedness, we can unlock not just the solutions to our greatest challenges, but the very best in each other, creating a world where every mind has the chance to shine, regardless of the package it comes in.